It's a real pleasure to be here tonight with you all. I've spent my entire academic career studying local government and issues of importance to local governments in the state of Florida. So when Mark and those from the University of Miami reached out to ask me to moderate, I was absolutely thrilled. When they told me that I would be responsible for coming up with the questions, I was a little bit scared. So I reached out to my students and to Coral Gables residents and some University of Miami professors, and I wanted to find out what are the topics of interest to those of you who are part of the Coral Gables community. So even though I had the ultimate responsibility of drafting the questions that we'll use for tonight's forum, these questions really came from submissions from those of you who are Coral Gables residents and University of Miami students. I simply looked for patterns in the topics that are most important to the Coral Gables community, and I edited the questions for both clarity and length. There were so many wonderful questions submitted that it was a difficult process to select just 10 questions for each of our sessions. I tallied it up, and if we used all of the questions that were submitted, we would have been here until tomorrow. So I did narrow it down to 10 questions for the first session and 10 questions for the second session. All of you will also have an opportunity to submit questions on 4x6 index cards that you can write questions and submit, and after we get through the 10 questions that I prepared for each session, I will go through some of the questions that are submitted by the members of the audience. So, without further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce the 4 candidates who are running for office in Group 4. I'll start in alphabetical order. First, we have Mr. Ralph Cabrera. Next, we have Mr. George L. Fors, Jr. Mr. Jackson Rip Holmes. And Ms. Carmen Olazabal. You may take a seat. Tonight's program will be divided into 2 parts. We have the commission candidates in Group 4 up first, then we'll have a very short break, and we will conclude with a second session, which will involve the 2 mayoral candidates running in Group 1. During each session, the first portion will be focused on my prepared questions, and then time permitting, we will transition into the audience questions. Only I know what questions will be asked. No one else, including the chamber or the candidates, has been made aware of my choices. The program will be conducted in the following manner. I will introduce all of the candidates by group in the race in alphabetical order. Each candidate will have 90 seconds for opening remarks at the beginning of each session. Responses to questions posed to the commission candidates will be limited to about 1 minute, although we will allow for more free-flowing discussion as it naturally occurs. I will manage this along with an opportunity for rebuttal, again at my sole discretion. Candidates are asked not to address each other directly in their comments or responses, but to direct their comments through the moderator to the audience. Our timekeeper tonight is Mr. Mark Trowbridge, president of the Coral Gables Chamber of Commerce, and he will provide you with a countdown on responses from the 1-minute mark. He's seated directly in front of us, and rest assured, he was born for this job given his impartiality and Midwestern nature. Now we're going to begin with opening statements. Mr. Cabrera, you may begin.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. I am delighted, thank you, George. I'm delighted to be with all of you this evening. My thanks go out to the... How about if we do it this way? Then we're all going to have to do it this way. I'm delighted to be with all of you this evening. My thanks go out to the Coral Gables Chamber of Commerce and the University of Miami for hosting tonight's event, as well as tonight's sponsor, Sora Global Insurance and Consulting, in addition to all the supporting organizations who played a role in tonight's event. I'm going to take a personal point of privilege to recognize some former members of the Coral Gables City Commission, beginning with Mayor Dorothy Thompson, who's with us. Mayor, thanks for being here with us. Also, Mayor Jim Kaysen, Jim, thank you for being with us. And finally, someone that I served for 12 years on the Coral Gables City Commission, Commissioner Maria Anderson. Maria, thank you for being with us. I'm excited to be here to discuss my platform and goals for our city. My platforms are relatively simple. All of them are issues that are important to all of you. From how we grow as a community and how that growth affects our livability, to how safe and peaceful our city is and how we ensure public safety for everyone, how we control traffic and invest in programs that enhance our well-being, and finally, how we respect our rich history and our very special quality of life. Again, I'm excited to be with all of you, and we're going to have fun with these microphones tonight.
Mr. Forrest, you may go next.
Thank you, Dr. Conley. Hello, everyone. I also want to thank you for being here today, as well as the commissioners. I want to thank the University of Miami, Mr. Trowbridge, as well as the Chamber of Commerce. I also want to thank especially my wife, who brought the baby at my insistence, even though she can't really understand what's going on. I see a lot of familiar faces here. I've said hi to many of you already. I've met you while I'm knocking on doors, asking about your concerns and your ideas for the city. For those who don't know me, I was born here, I was raised here in Coral Gables, where my family still lives. They moved on to Country Club Prado in 1998. I run a small law firm with my father. It's located at 1108 Ponce de Leon. He and I have been practicing there together for 10 years, he for over 20. Now my wife and I, Devin, and our daughter Olivia, live in the North Gables on Segovia, Madera. We live very close to the proposed annexed area of Little Gables and on two cut-through streets, Segovia and Madera. I decided to run for office because I worked very hard to be able to stay in Coral Gables, raise my family here the same way that my father and my mother raised me here. But when I had a child, Olivia, I began to immediately become concerned with the question of whether my daughter was going to grow up in the same Coral Gables that I was able to grow up in. I realized that was not a guarantee, and I decided to step off the sideline and to serve to the city. Thank you.
How we doing? Okay, thank you. I got a compliment earlier today from political cortadito. She said I'm funny, but I may be a crying clown tonight, but you'll find out more. Don't we agree that the story of the University of Miami is incredible? It used to be Suntan U. By the way, I was born here, raised here. I'm 67. I'm all of 67 years old here. I'm the oldest candidate up here, probably. And now it's no longer Suntan U. We've got Donna Shalala has just been elected to Congress. We lucked out with Mr. Frank replacing her, our great speaker tonight. Thank you for hosting it. Thank you to the Chamber of Commerce. They're now the preeminent candidate forum organization. I found out tonight my old buddies, the Ponce Business Association, has passed the torch on to, that forum will still take place next week, but we know who the hard, prolonged fighters are. It's the Chamber. I do have an alarm to raise. There's a lot of different things I want to say tonight. I have 5 issues, but the alarm is on Tuesday, the city is going to vote, I'm afraid, to take Coral Gables to Miracle Mile, the Main Street, to 15-story buildings. I need you to rise up and go against that. We don't want a Main Street with 15 stories on it. Thank you.
Ms. Olazabal, you may go next.
Good evening. I am Carmen Olazabal, and I'm running for Coral Gables Commissioner because I want to continue to serve this community. 10 years ago, my husband and I, we were looking for places to settle. And of all the places, we chose Coral Gables. Coral Gables is a beautiful, well-planned community with residents that are proud of that community. I want to honor that sense of pride and build upon what we have to continue to improve our quality of life. I started my career as an engineer and later went into public service. And I'm thankful for it because it is in public service that I found my true passion and purpose. I could have chosen to go into a lucrative career in the private sector, but instead I've dedicated my life to improving the quality of life of residents. I believe that elected office is about public service. It's about giving more than receiving. It's about creating stronger communities. We need to elect candidates that truly care for the community, who don't mislead the public for political gain, that are not funded by special interests, and that have the right leadership skills and experience to serve you. So on April 9th, you have a choice. Choose to have a professional form of government and vote for Carmen Olazábal. Thank you.
Thank you. Before I get started with the questions, I'd like to go over a few rules of engagement. In order to maintain the timeliness and proper decorum, we would like to set these ground rules for tonight's dialogues. All candidates have been informed in advance of these rules, and we ask the same courtesy of all of our audience members. We did have a positive campaign pledge that 3 of the candidates have chosen to sign. Mr. Cabrera, Mr. Fors, and Ms. Olazábal have signed the positive campaign pledge, stating that they will focus on the issues and not personal attacks. Insulting or slanderous remarks, heckling, or verbal outbursts during the program will not be tolerated. This includes booing and hissing. Anyone exhibiting this type of behavior will be asked to leave by staff or security. Any signs, placards, banners, cards, pamphlets, or campaign materials are not permitted inside of the field house for distribution. Each candidate was offered an expo table outside of the field house to distribute campaign materials. Please hold your applause until all candidates have made their concluding remarks at the end of each session. I thank you for your cooperation and hope you will find tonight's discussion enlightening. All right, now to the questions. What do you think are the 3 most important issues facing Coral Gables, and how would you address each of these issues? Mr. Fors, we'll start with you.
Thank you, Dr. Conley. Getting right into it here. It's no secret what I believe are the primary concerns for this election cycle. The first one is annexation, particularly annexation of Little Gables. For anybody who's read the report that's available on the city's website, prepared by the city, it's a raw deal for the city. Right off the bat, mathematically, we're going to lose millions of dollars. Our government system is going to be bogged down, including the building department, bringing these areas up to code. If you analyze, as I have, with a fine-tooth comb, this report, you'll see that most of the benefits from this report are to the Miami-Dade County, not for the residents. I have yet to find an answer that I'm satisfied with as to how it benefits us as residents. Secondly is ensuring smart, intelligent growth. I do believe our city is under the threat of overdevelopment. The last couple of years, I've seen developments be erected that are not consistent with our character, outside of code, and most importantly, projects that the majority of our citizens have opposed and yet have been approved.
Thank you. Mr. Holmes, you may go next.
Thank you very much. I have a personal alarm to raise to you. I alluded to previously. On Tuesday, there's going to be a vote of the City Commission, and if we can make the difference, they're leaning towards killing low-rise Miracle Mile retail. And that means that within 10 years, we'll have 15-story buildings on Coral Gables Main Street. I happen to own property. My grandfather knew the founder, George Merrick. He helped my grandfather choose which store to get, which stores, rather. And so I urge you all to, I'll be sending you emails or robocalls, respond, maybe come to the City Commission meeting. The future of our main street is at stake, which means, think of a 15-story Miracle Mile, high crime. We changed the demographics of Coral Gables. Thank you.
Ms. Olazábal?
I think the 3 main issues that are facing the city are overdevelopment, traffic, and sustainability. With regards to overdevelopment, there has been recent developments that have not been in keeping with our neighborhoods. And we need to make sure that we're not affecting the character of our neighborhoods, and we're thinking of the vision of the city that we want when we make those development decisions. With regard to traffic, traffic has been increasing significantly over the last decade. We need to find better ways to manage it and continue to build upon doing traffic calming and speed limit reductions, and also coordinating with MDX and all other agencies to try to manage that traffic. And regarding sustainability, we're in ground zero of global warming, so we need to start thinking of ways to adapt to make sure that our infrastructure there's a plan to not be vulnerable to sea level rise when the time comes.
Mr. Cabrera?
Well, my three issues are growth and development, traffic, and public safety. Can you all hear me okay? As it relates to growth and development, I want to assure everyone in this room that we have an exceptional zoning code. It's not, there's nothing wrong with it. What's wrong with it is that there are times that we relax that zoning code, and we do not adhere to it. So I'm for tempered development. I'm for development that is compatible to residential neighborhoods, that improves the livability of residential neighborhoods, that truly takes into account parking and traffic. Let me move into traffic. As far as traffic is concerned, I did many things during my 12-year career as a commissioner, but there's still a lot to be done. We get 180,000 cars going through our city every single day, from Flagler to 152nd Avenue. The best thing that we could be doing today is what our police department is in fact doing, and that is they are hiring retired officers to be neighborhood traffic officers. And last but not least, safety, public safety. We need to continue to be vigilant to make sure that we do everything we can to, if there is a criminal coming into our city, we make sure they leave two ways, in a paddy wagon or in a fire rescue vehicle.
Thank you, Mr. Cabrera. This second question was submitted by a University of Miami student. The Florida State Legislature recently considered a bill that would prohibit municipalities from passing any regulations on businesses unless the city is given the specific approval of the state legislature. To what degree do you believe individual cities should have the freedom to regulate business at the local level? Should the city use public funds to challenge these state preemption laws in court? Mr. Holmes, we'll start with you.
Thank you. Thank you all very much. I'm going to take a liberty. I have an answer on the traffic. I'm borrowing a little time here, which is, and our Commissioner Vince Lago has all the answers. He's even got a lawsuit over it. We need to put, there is a solution. I drove a taxi for so many years, 25 years, right? I know the solution. Metro Rail on the 830s, on our super highways, on the 836, on the Palmetto, on the Turnpike, on our super highways. That's the answer to our traffic problem. The county says there's not enough money. And our great hero, Mr. Lagos, is suing him and says, well, what happened to the $2 billion that are missing from the penny sales tax transportation fund that's been misappropriated? Now, moving on to the question that you asked. Tell me again.
To what degree do you believe individual cities should have the freedom to regulate business at the local level, and should the city use public funds to challenge state preemption laws in court?
Yeah, it's really funny. I hope I'm gonna take a little joke here and then I'll answer. Don't regulate the city, do regulate the county. Like, why is our penny sales tax money $2 billion missing? I agree that we are lucky to have home rule here. We can do a better job in Coral Gables than the state can.
Ms. Olazabal?
I think local government understands its municipality better than the state can. And that's the reason why we need to continue to support home rule. And I think it will be a good use of our money to challenge this bill, because this is what gives us the ability to control the uses and plan our city properly. And that's what Coral Gables has been doing for the last almost 100 years. And that's what makes Coral Gables unique. So we have a lot to lose if this passes, because we know how we want to plan the city, and having that control is essential to our planning continuing to be as good as it's been and building upon the vision and the community that we have.
Mr. Cabrera?
Incidentally, we've been saying the words home rule. For those of you that are not familiar with that word, it just simply means that the municipality has the ability to make decisions instead of the state. And I, for one, can tell you, as a former commissioner, we are the closest to you, the voters, and we should be able to continue to provide you with the services, the legislation, the quasi-judicial services that give you the opportunity to tell us what's important, not Tallahassee. So not only would I support ongoing home rule, Doctor, I would support the ability to lobby against it and allocate the necessary financial resources to ensure that we maintain that independence.
Mr. Force?
Thank you. The other interesting thing about home rule and the fact that we're a chartered municipality is that we have stronger powers to govern ourselves than the average municipality. We've used this very wisely during the past few years. Not every municipality has the ability to do this. I would absolutely dedicate public funds to fighting this battle if the Florida legislature were to try to infringe on our ability to regulate within our city boundaries, because it's a slippery slope. They'll use that same precedent against us to take other powers away. I also have other areas where I would like to explore the possibility of using legal action to assert our right as Coral Gables to govern our city limits. One possibility that I have been exploring is a similar lawsuit, reallocating funds from other lawsuits we are currently proceeding with to assert our power to exercise more control over our traffic regulation within our city limits. These are things and the type of litigation that I think we can feel comfortable putting dollars to, because at the end of the day, we have a right to govern our local city government.
Thank you. This next question was submitted by a Coral Gables resident. GPS apps, such as Waze, often lead drivers to use residential streets as cut-throughs to avoid traffic on main roads, making residential streets more dangerous. What possible solutions do you have to fix this problem and make residential streets safer? How would you include residents in this process? Ms. Olazabal, we'll start with you.
Well, it's certainly a challenge, but maybe we outsmart Waze. Maybe we hack it. Or I think what the city is actually proactively doing now is working with Waze and learning from the information it gathers. And then it's able to get the traffic patterns to learn which streets are having more traffic. So then you can start defining where you're going to put traffic calming, where you're going to put speed limit enforcement, and also communicating back to Waze. Because if you start seeing that there's a problem on certain streets, then maybe you do speed limit enforcement on that street, and that gets communicated to Waze. And then when runners, people that are cutting through see that, then they maybe decide not to take that, that route, because they may get ticketed. So traffic is something that we have to be thinking about all the time, and just actively managing it. So,
Mr. Cabrera.
Conceptually, Waze is a wonderful tool. I use it every day, and I'm sure most of us in this room do as well. The challenge is to develop a communication process between our city and Waze. Our city has done numerous traffic studies. It understands where the greatest bottlenecks occur, where the greatest cut-through traffic is a challenge for us in the morning from 7 to 9, in the evenings from 4 to 6, east and or west. As I said before, we get 180,000 cars going through our city every single day. While conceptually, Waze is proven to be a very sound tool, there needs to be a dialogue between the City of Coral Gables and Waze, and I take you back to what I said a few minutes ago. The Neighborhood Traffic Officer Program, which is something that the Chief of Police wants to begin soon, or has already begun with 3 officers, will help us tackle the areas that are most prevalent to speeds and volume. And what the Chief is doing is he's actually taking officers who have recently retired and brought them back to work during those high peak times.
Mr. Force?
Thank you. We absolutely have to work with Waze and continue to work with Waze, as many other municipalities have. However, I think at the end of the day, our cut-through traffic problem, which is really twofold, not only the fact that people are cutting through, but the manner in which they're cutting through, this is a problem that we have to take head-on within our city. The city recently has made great advances in negotiations with Miami-Dade County. They've reached a memorandum of understanding that sets forth a formula that allows us to implement certain traffic calming on various streets. I don't think that's enough. As I've been walking doors campaigning, I've knocked on nearly 4,000 doors. During that process, I've started to create a list of streets where folks are 100% fed up with the cut-through traffic. It is the single factor that ruins their quality of life on a daily basis. How do we calm traffic on these streets is not an easy answer. However, we know where the problem is, and we know that through the county, we can find ways to be able to calm traffic on those streets. The thing is that we have to keep going back to the county, pressing the county, negotiating with the county, because we will no longer take our cut-through traffic in the current state that it is any longer.
Mr. Holmes.
Thank you. I got to make a quick confession. I'm nervous tonight, and I forgot to thank you all, the audience, in my opening remarks. I think that it's true that Coral Gables has the highest quality residents in the whole county. And I'm fond of saying that there are many of you in this audience right here, and those who will be watching later on or contemporaneously, that would do better certainly than me as city commissioner. And that's great about our city, that we have such achievers that there are actually so many residents who are better than those even who get elected, which I may not be one of them, but I just want to express the humility here. Now, back to the traffic. Vince Lago and I have the answer. I'm going to brag to you about myself for a second. The founder of Uber knows me, Travis Kalanick. I have my picture with him. We can get this done. We got to get the metro rail. We can reduce the traffic by 1/3, and then all of these smaller issues take care of themselves.
Thank you, Mr. Holmes. This next question was submitted by a Coral Gables resident. Coral Gables has a millage rate of 5.559. The average statewide millage rate in Florida is approximately 4.6. Do you believe Coral Gables property taxes are too low, about right, or too high? As an elected official, how would you change the millage rate? We'll start with Mr. Cabrera.
The city of Coral Gables and 34 other municipalities all share in the millage rate. And I say 34 other municipalities because that includes Miami-Dade County government. We are in the last third in terms of millage rate. So I would say we're somewhere 29th, maybe 30th today. What's really more important is how we use our dollars. How are the dollars well spent? How are we allocating those dollars to public safety, to public works, to parks and public service, all of the things that are important to you. So in terms of taxes, I still believe that as a full-service city, we still rank as one of the lowest in millage rates, and that's what you have to look at. You have to look at the entire picture of 35 municipalities. So for me, it's more important how we spend those taxes and make sure that they stay stable than either reducing or increasing taxes.
Mr. Force.
Thank you. My general thoughts on property taxes is that a city should tax its residents exactly as much as it needs to ensure high-quality services. In this case, Coral Gables, first-class high-quality services, no more, no less. If any surplus exists, it should be rerouted to put money back in the taxpayers' pockets, not find a way to spend what is left. I believe that at this moment, our millage rate is probably where it needs to be. However, I identify several threats that may raise our property taxes. One of those being, which I alluded to earlier, the annexation of areas like Little Gables, which add no benefit to Coral Gables and threaten to raise our taxes by requiring us to hire additional personnel, bring their infrastructure, drainage, and structures up to code. all with zero money flowing back except for tax revenue that does not cover it at the outset. Thank you.
Mr. Holmes?
Thank you all very much. Just to finish out this thing about the traffic, what I'm advocating with the city, so far they're not buying it, is that they join Vince Lago's lawsuit and say, where's the $2 billion that are missing? And he's even advocating this thing about the Mayoral. I think that's what we can do as a city. It's a county decision. We can solve the problem of traffic. But the city needs to step up and join Vince Lago in his lawsuit. Now, I'm for low taxes. I own property on Mayoral Mile. That's where I get most of my income. And my basic expense is a gigantic tax bill every year. I think we can do better. I believe that we need to protect our police with their money. We need to protect our fire with full money, and our trash pickup. And then after that, I think we need to have stricter scrutiny. I would be a low tax vote. Mr. Cabrera was a low tax vote. He's not articulating how good he is. We need to lower taxes.
Ms. Olazabal?
Thanks, Rick.
So what's important to know is that the millage rate is something that comes about when you're doing the budget. And the budget is a yearly plan that is done together with the community. I think what's really important is that we must give you good value for your money, that we're looking at every line item and making sure that when we're delivering services, we're delivering them in the most efficient way. And that we don't say, well, that was the most efficient way we did it 10 years ago. Well, have we looked at that process again? Can we deliver service in a more efficient way? And evaluate the budget that way. Once we find those efficiencies, then we have options. Do we decide to show that within the millage rate? Or where do we put it? Do we invest it in sustainability? Do we invest it in paying down our pension debt? Do we invest it in doing a park? So there's a lot of good use for the money, and as a community, with community input, we can decide what we want to do with the efficiencies that we achieve.
This next question was submitted by a Coral Gables resident. In general, do you think that local candidates should focus solely on issues within their purview that affect the city, or do you think it is appropriate to publicly take positions on national policy? We'll start with Mr. Force.
Thank you. That's an interesting question because as I've been speaking to voters during this campaign, they've often asked my opinion on matters of public policy that I'll never have the opportunity to affect in any way, shape, or form. With that being said, I believe voters have a right to know what a local candidate's political views are on a fundamental level, regardless of what seat in government, whether it's local or state, and regardless of whether they'll be able to legislate on these issues. I don't see any problem with requiring us to state our position or getting involved in perhaps not national issues, but state issues, because eventually these issues do trickle down, and most importantly, as someone alluded to earlier, nowadays with the stalemates we see at the state and federal level, really the last place that you can affect change, in my opinion, is at the local level. If you look across the country, important legislation is being passed at the local level because, frankly, due to bipartisanship, it cannot be passed at higher levels.
Mr. Holmes.
Thank you very much. Great question. And I said that I have 5 things that I advocate. This is a good segue into one of those. You know, in general, I think that if someone's in a city commission meeting, they got to stick to the subject, right? So anything that they do, a commissioner or mayor does in their official acts has got to be city-oriented. But of course, they have their personal life, and they're free to do whatever they want in their personal life. Where they intersect, I have a proposal. It'd be great. I wish I could take a secret poll of everyone here, whether you like this. The Trump administration has many great things that they're doing. One of the bad things to me is they're attacking immigrants. Now, if I were elected, I would push for city IDs to help the immigrants. New Haven has done this, some cities in California. We can give our immigrants that are under attack city IDs. Believe it or not, they need them. I propose that.
Ms. Olazabal.
So this is a complicated issue from the standpoint that sometimes local issues and issues at the national level do have a common place. But I think for the most part, as commissioners, we're elected to represent you at the local level. And for the most part, we should stay away from getting into the national politics, because that is not the platform that we're presenting to you when we're doing local politics. We're talking about how your trash is going to be picked up, how we're going to solve the traffic issues, how we're going to solve development. So you're voting on us based on what you want for your community, not what you want at a national level. Now, sometimes there's, national level politics that affect our home rule or affect how we can make decisions at the local level. And at that point, then we do have to get involved. And, we have to make sure that we're listening to our community and always representing them adequately.
Mr. Cabrera.
Like Mr. Flores, I've been walking, and I feel his pain because I do get asked about the wall quite a bit. And generally my response is, you mean one around Coral Gables? But seriously, the building you're in tonight, your government had something to do with that building. The minute you leave here and you get in your cars and you pull in your driveway and you see your trash pit and you see your garbage can and you see the electric that's powering your home and the water that's allowing you to drink and bathe and fill your pool, your local government has a great deal to do with that. And that's why local government is so important. So to mix the two, to me, doesn't make any sense because we're touching you every single day. And that's why you have local officials. If you start mixing the two, you get further from you. You don't have the ability to understand what you're looking for, what your true needs are. And therefore, I just don't see any pairing of federal policy with local government.
This next question was submitted by a Coral Gables resident. According to the Miami Herald, there have been 2 reported armed carjackings in Coral Gables in the last 2 months. Informal conversations on Nextdoor suggest that neighbors are concerned about home break-ins. What is your perception of crime in Coral Gables, and what steps would you take to protect the safety of residents and visitors? Mr. Holmes, we'll start with you.
Thank you. Great example of how great the University of Miami is. Lucky we have her for our moderator. I'm a crime victim. I was blown away by a burglary and then blown away again because the police failed to. I told them who did it, right? And they said, well, we're not going to take fingerprints. So that was really hurtful for me. Recently, there was another car burglary, and to my amazement, they cleared the burglary within a couple of weeks, and so I feel much better. But, I think maybe we could do a poll of crime victims every 6 months, actually do a survey and say, how do you feel about the police response to the crime? What could they do better? We need to follow up with our crime victims.
Ms. Olazabal.
Public safety is the highest duty of government and the most important quality of life issue. We need to work with police to make sure that we give them the adequate resources so that they can proactively manage our crime. When I was interim city manager, I worked closely with police, and I made sure that the visibility of the police officers that were out there, that they were more accessible, and then we proactively looked at hiring more police officers to fill the vacancies that we had. It is very important that we focus on continuing to keep our city safe. And you have to think about who do you want making public safety decisions for you. Somebody who has hands-on experience and has worked with police directly, or a candidate who in the past has decided to say that crime statistics are going up, even though there's a Florida Department of Law Enforcement audit that says that's not the case. So, you know, make sure that when you're thinking about public safety, you choose a candidate that is looking at the facts to proactively protect you.
Mr. Cabrera.
Let me give you some facts. Emergency response times in our city are less than 4 minutes. Non-emergency response times are less than 8 minutes. There are not many municipalities in this region that can boast that kind of response time. What really is a critical component of law enforcement is proper staffing. In the next 6 to 12 months, we're going to lose 6 officers just by retirement alone. This doesn't mean that these officers are going somewhere. They're retiring from the department. So it's critical to continue to support the efforts of our police chief to ensure that we're properly staffed at all levels. Today we have 186 sworn officers. We need to keep those levels high. Incidentally, before I forget, I had a chance to do a ride-along this week with one of our city's finest, one of our sergeants, Sergeant John Boblitz. You talk about getting an education on law enforcement. We have some of the finest police officers in the region, but I would be remiss if I didn't tell you that we have a very well-kept secret in our city. It's called the Neighborhood Crime Watch Program. And I encourage each and every one of you who live in a residential neighborhood to engage in the Neighborhood Crime Watch Program. They'll help you become the eyes and the ears of your neighborhood.
Mr. Force.
I was out there knocking on doors the day that the manhunt ensued after the occupied home invasion. And I remember thinking to myself that day that we'd be speaking about it today at the debate, and here we are. I think that the police department is one of the best in the state. Our response times are remarkable, and I believe our crime rate is something to be proud of. With that being said, it's difficult to bump into somebody, as I'm visiting neighbor to neighbor, who hasn't been affected by some kind of crime, whether it be petty theft, burglary, or vehicular intrusion. For that person, their crime rate is 100%. As I've stated before in my mailers, which some of you may have received, for me, safety is non-negotiable. If elected, my number one priority would be, or not my number one priority, but among my number one priorities, is to work with the police department to find out exactly what they need to do what they have to do so that nobody has to experience any crime on their block, much less the type that we've seen in the last month or two, the scary type like home invasions and carjackings.
This next question was submitted by a University of Miami student. In 2017, Coral Gables resolved to establish a goal of 100% clean, renewable energy in the city. However, some residents who have attempted to purchase and install solar panels on their homes report being denied by city authorities. How do you think Coral Gables should balance protecting the city's aesthetic and allowing for more environmentally friendly practices? We'll start with Ms. Olazabal.
So certainly becoming greener is one of the highest priorities that we have, we should have as a nation, not only as a city, but as a nation. So this is a matter that we have to look very carefully. But for 100 years in the city, we've also kept our architectural standards very high. So where do you balance those two? And I think we need to probably do a workshop with the community to solve this issue. I think there's also technology that is coming in the pipeline that is aesthetic too, that, you know, when you have like solar roof tiles, that can be very efficient as well, but also have the aesthetic quality that Coral Gables looks for. So I think there are solutions out there, and we need to work as a community to define this, but certainly both aesthetics and you know, renewable energy are two very important objectives in the city. So how do you balance the two needs to be a community solution.
Mr. Cabrera.
For the sake of time, I'm going to highlight some of what I think are our sustainability priorities. I believe strongly in continuing to expand our freebie program, our electrical capabilities. I also feel I'm very interested in ensuring that any new construction, specifically commercial and residential, have charging stations for electric vehicles, something that's not happening today. I also want to continue to encourage leadership in energy and environmental design, LEED, for both residential and commercial properties, and keeping permit fees low for anything that has to do with sustainability is a great way to incentivize not only builders, but residents of using more solar power, upgrading our current pump stations, which are oftentimes very ineffective, restoring our historic fountains with recyclable water features instead of losing that water. That's one of the reasons a lot of our fountains are not working, folks. And last but certainly not least, lobbying the state legislature to ensure that they assist us with sea level rise in our southern communities.
Mr. Force.
Thank you. I too recognize that sustainability is a key concern for this city, especially with over 40 miles of coastline within our city limits. The city has to work hard to target sustainability efforts with respect to water, energy, and efficiency. Now, with respect to solar panels and other energy efficient mechanisms that clash with our name, the City Beautiful, it's an extremely difficult question. I've spoken to many voters who say that the gig is up and that it doesn't matter if you don't like the way they look, everybody, or as many people as possible should have solar power in their house. I've also spoken with voters that said, that will tell you that they'd rather, over their dead body, would they like to see their next door neighbor put solar panels on the front portion of their house. In my view, the single most important function of an elected official faced with difficult decisions like this is to carry out the will of the majority of the people who elected him. I think that eventually this is something, if advancements don't catch up, that may be something that the city will have, the residents will have to weigh in by way of a referendum.
Mr. Holmes.
Thank you. We've come a long way in Coral Gables. Years ago, Maria Anderson, wherever you are out there, was a lone vote saying we got to get right on the environment. And now we have, I keep praising Vince Lago, who's finding new ways that I had never even heard of to take us green. I'm going to live up to the reputation of political cortadito, tell you a joke, and then I'm going to get serious. We all know that Miami could go the way of Atlantis, right? Underwater, the lost city of Atlantis, underwater. So I've asked Atlantis University, there is one in Miami, to get a research and development grant from the Department of Defense, they have more money than God, and develop gills for humans so we can have Aquaman will be ready when the sea overtakes us. That's my joke. On the serious side, Governor Christ, I got to work with him a little bit on this, says we can replace Saudi Arabia. Check this out on my website. We can replace Saudi Arabia as the richest place on earth, providing the clean energy to the world in the form of fuel cell liquid hydrogen. Florida can be the richest place on earth, providing fuel cell liquid hydrogen invented by NASA at Cape Canaveral to the world.
Thank you, Mr. Holmes. We'll finish with a question from the audience. What is your stance on the rent-a-scooters being allowed in Coral Gables? Mr. Cabrera.
I haven't taken one yet, but I've seen many of folks take a dive on them. I can tell you the first thing that needs to be done, the reduction of speed is critical on those scooters. I think they can get up to upwards of 15 miles per hour. That's dangerous. I'm an avid cyclist, and I can tell you 15 miles per hour on a bicycle is very dangerous. So that would be the first thing I would do. I would reduce the speeds. I would also make it mandatory to wear a helmet. Something that's a novel idea, but if you go down in one of those scooters and you're not wearing some head protection, you're going to be hurt. And last but not least, I would ask that they not use the sidewalk. The sidewalk is meant for pedestrians and not scooters or bicycles for that fact.
Mr. Force.
I am one of those people who Ralph likely saw take a dive on one of those scooters. I recently recovered from a limp, or maybe I haven't recovered actually. For those of you who have come to your door, you may have seen that I actually knock door to door on one of these scooters. It is not one of the ones that you rent. I purchased my own. I don't ride it downtown. I only ride it in the residential neighborhoods, very slowly, especially since my fall. I think that one thing that these scooters in downtown, and as we see them lying around at various stations and sort of proliferating our streets, especially in the downtown area, much to people's dismay, based on some of the conversations I've had, do have one value, and that's that they take more cars off the street. I know a lot of people who make trips up and down Ponce on those scooters that usually wouldn't, or that usually would take their vehicle, that is. So that's a good thing about them. With that being said, I absolutely agree that we have to reduce the speed. I also think that something has to be done about whether you're allowed to go on the street or the sidewalk. If I'm not mistaken, in the downtown areas, you must be on the sidewalk.
Mr. Holmes.
Thank you very much. I'm getting too old. I don't know about the scooters that much. The city is doing, an experimental program right now. They're testing it out. They're getting feedback. No decisions have been made. I think, I trust them to do a pretty good job on that. I think it's a great thing to have scooters, and I agree with Mr. Cabrera, let's not have them go too fast. I'm going to use this opportunity to sneak something in. I'm for misting machines in the downtown. Have you all noticed, is it just me, is it getting like hotter and hotter every summer? And you go downtown and you want to shop or something, and then you're suddenly saying, oh, I got to go home, I can't take it. So I believe that we can have misting machines like they have in Disney World or even on Ocean Drive. And they're not expensive. I've done my homework on this. For $20,000, we can do Miracle Mile. For $10,000, we can do Giralda. Misting machines, let's stay cool in the summer.
Ms. Olazabal.
Staying cool is important, I have to say. I think we certainly have a traffic problem. So I think exploring different modes of transportation is something we need to do as a city to see where we find what's the right match. I think a scooter provides a different alternative to people to get out and about, and sometimes it's that last mile that takes you. But in doing a pilot, part of what we need to do is learn. So we need to learn what's working, what's not working, and there's been some accidents, and there's been scooters on sidewalks that have caused accidents or have made people afraid. And the idea with regards to public spaces is you really want to have we want to invite people to come out, to enjoy the outside, to enjoy walking, taking a stroll. And, we can't jeopardize that, pedestrian safety, bike safety, and all of that with scooters. So we need to find a balance where we all can coexist, but giving options on how to get that last mile in.
Thank you. We will now move into closing remarks. Each candidate will have 90 seconds to make their closing remarks. We will go in reverse alphabetical order, beginning with Ms. Olazabal.
The real issues confronting our city are overdevelopment, traffic, and sustainability. And to solve those problems, who would you want representing you? I'm a civil engineer from MIT, and I have a master's in business administration from Harvard Business School. In addition to 6 years of experience in engineering, I have over 10 years of experience working in local government. During my time in the city, we advanced initiatives such as Miracle Mile in Giralda, multiple traffic calming project, sustainability master plan, tree succession plan, and multiple park projects. I know the city, how to make it better, and how to work with others to deliver results for you. So this election is about the type of candidate that we want to represent us. So do we want a career politician that uses smear campaigns to tilt elections in his favor? Do we want candidates that are funded by special interests and represented by lobbyists? Or do we want a candidate that truly wants to serve her community, that has dedicated her life to public service, and that has the education, experience, and integrity to get the job done? on April 9th, choose a government you aspire to have, and vote for Carmen Olazábal. In this campaign, it is very likely that we continue to see smear campaigns, and I just want to guide you to my website, Carmen for Coral Gables, and go to my fact check, because every time a smear campaign is placed, I put the truth next to it. So don't take one, don't take propagandas, don't take one source. Make sure that you're checking your facts, and vote for Carmen Olazábal for good government.
Thank you. Mr. Holmes.
Great closing remarks. MIT, we love them. I'll just kind of like repeat what I've said. Please keep it in mind. On this Tuesday, the City Commission is either going to keep low-rise Miracle Mile and vote down this parking garage redevelopment, or it's going to take us to 15-story buildings, which then urbanizes the main street of Coral Gables. Think if you're moving to Coral Gables, you see 15-story buildings on the main street. Is that a suburb? I don't think so. And our principal asset, our greatest asset, you, the residents, our quality residents, say, well, if they got a 15-story main street, I think maybe I'll go to Pinecrest or Kendale Lakes or Cutler Bay or here or there, Doral, to a true suburb. We don't need this. I hope you will help me rally, and we can win this thing on Tuesday. Vote down the 15-story buildings. Vote down this parking garage redevelopment. I'm going to close with my maybe best issue overall, traffic. If Travis Kalanick of Uber could tell you tonight, yeah, he helped us. I know Rip Holmes. I know the solution to this. We can put the Metro Rail on our superhighways, the 836. We can reduce traffic probably by about a third. We got to give people an alternative. Vince Lago is better than I am. What I'm asking the city to do is join him in this lawsuit. We do have some control over traffic in the city of Coral Gables. Thank you.
Mr. Force.
I want to thank everybody again for being here tonight. The fact that you're interested in this process and are involved is important. As I mentioned earlier, national government and national news gets all the media attention, but the fact is that nobody makes a bigger difference in your day-to-day lives than this commission. This small group of people has the greatest impact on the things that are most important to you. Your property values, your quality of life, the traffic you experience when you're leaving the house. I thank you for being interested and recognizing how important this is. I'm a first-time politician. I'd like to believe that what I represent is a clean slate, a fresh start for this city. I come to you with no stale political grudges or stale political alliances or conflicts of interest. It's for those of you who know, it was alluded to that some of us may have conflicts of interest because of the money we've raised. I have raised more than any other candidate. The people who have donated to me, you can go on the city's website and see who it is. It's family, friends, and neighbors who donated up to $85,000, have since raised more. I believe this is evidence of the fact that all the people around me believe that I'm the right person for the job. I'm also a problem solver. This is what I do for work. Sometimes that requires persuading somebody to see things your way. Sometimes it requires compromise. Sometimes it requires locking horns with your opponent. To get anything done as a commissioner, you have to have the ability to get two other commissioners to see things your way. I submit to you that I am the best qualified candidate for that role. And finally, I join Carmen in denouncing smear campaigns as well. And I know we didn't get to every issue today. Please feel free to call or email me if there's anything that you would like to discuss to me. I will be accessible to you before and after the election if elected. Thank you.
Mr. Cabrera.
Once again, many thanks to all of you for attending tonight's event. I hope you leave this evening with a better understanding of my qualifications and goals. If you're interested in discussing issues further, I encourage you to stop by our table outside. It's somewhere near Blue Road. There you're going to find literature and, more importantly, all the ways that you can contact me. You know, my past as city commissioner has taught me well. I navigated through an attack on our country known as 9/11, a global recession, and two back-to-back hurricanes that left many of us without power for multiple weeks. The present has afforded me the ability to see our city in a completely different light as a private citizen. The future will hopefully afford me the chance to represent your needs in an inclusive and transparent manner. I believe there's still much to be accomplished, and I believe that our city needs a leader who can make that happen. I'm that leader. And that's why I want to continue building on our past successes as your commissioner. Together, we can look forward to a bright and prosperous day for our city beautiful. So as I end my comments tonight, I'd like to wish you all who live, who work, who learn, and play in our city, our beautiful city, a very safe evening and good night, Coral Gables.
Thank you. How about a round of applause for our Group 4 candidates? Thank you all for participating in tonight's event. We will now take a short break to reset the dais for our next session with the Group 1 mayoral candidates. Okay, we'll now reconvene for our second session with our Group 1 mayoral candidates. We have with us Ms. Jeanette Sleznick and Mr. Raul Valdez-Fowley. Let's please welcome our candidates. Our first session went very well. I have a note here that I'm supposed to remind you of the rules, but we didn't have any issues, so it appears that everyone is willing to comply with our rules of engagement, so thank you. We're going to start with opening statements by our two candidates. You'll have 90 seconds each. We will begin with Ms. Sleznick.
Thank you very much. Good evening. I am your former City Commissioner, Jeanette Sleznick, and I'm speaking on 3 points tonight. Coral Gables citizens deserve a mayor who treats them with respect and courtesy. A mayor who must pay attention to what they are saying and not ignore them. That is not what we have now at City Hall, but I intend to bring this back to City Hall. During my 2 years on the City Commission, I made service to others my #1 issue, #1 priority, because I love working with citizens. The mayor sets the tone of government, and we need to have a welcoming tone at City Hall, not only for the citizens, but also for the employees. #2, development. Good commercial developments that abide by our zoning code and master plan can be positive for the future of our city and boost our tax base as well. But overdevelopment, too much, too fast, too high, too big, too bulky than our code allows, can ruin our quality of life and negate our name, the City Beautiful. We need a mayor who stands strong behind our time-tested master plan. We need to protect our residential neighborhoods. We need to stabilize our traffic load, which already overburdens our streets. In my 2 years at the Commission, I lived by the philosophy, action, not words. Public safety is the last issue, and we need to support our police chief in all that he does 7 days a week, 24 hours a day.
Thank you,
In closing,
Ms. Sleznick.
I want to say thank you and return me to City Hall to be your mayor.
Thank you. Mr. Valdez-Fowley?
I thought this was going to be a civilized debate and not get personal, but I will go into my introduction ignoring the comments made about me. And I want to thank the Chamber and everybody here for attending. And my motto, my campaign slogan is Coral Gables better than ever. The 3 functions that a city, a municipality is supposed to undertake: safety, rescue, fire, and sanitation. I think we've never been better. In safety, when I took office, we had 16 vacancies in the police department. Today, we are fully staffed. We have neighborhood assistants, neighborhood patrol officers patrolling the neighborhoods, and they're very respected by the neighbors and trusted. We have CCTV cameras surrounding Coral Gables and license plate readers, and that is, I think, and we have stability in the police department, which we didn't have before. And I think I had a lot to do with that in a very elegant, very substantial manner. Rescue, 3 minutes. Sanitation, we have 4 pickups a week. That's 11,000 homes, 44,000 touches per home per month. I mean, 4 homes per month. That is 2.2 million times we touch your house a year. We have the 11th lowest tax rate in Miami-Dade County, and I think that we are doing very, very well providing the services we do with our very low tax rate. Thank you.
Thank you. We will now move into the prepared questions. This first question was submitted by a Coral Gables resident. Where do you stand on annexing parts of unincorporated Miami-Dade County into Coral Gables? Specifically, what effect will annexation have on the provision of city services to residents? We'll start with Mr. Valdez-Fowley.
Yes. I have talked to the chief of police about this a lot, and he is very much for annexation because it would round out our borders and it would make our CCTV, our license plate readers, much more effective in having bites all over Coral Gables. Our chief of police is for this. Will it cost us money? Yes, it will cost us money the first 2 years, but we will make it, after the second year, we will be much better. And let me read something to you. Annexation, good idea, rounds our borders while expanding the city's tax base. Little Gables is an important transitional area between Coral Gables and Miami. And I would rather us having determined its future than leaving this to other jurisdictions. You know who said that? My opponent. And it is in the Coral Gables community newspapers. My opponent said this, and she was quoted there.
Ms. Lesnick.
I am very much in favor of annexation. I think it will really help. I've talked to the police chief too, and he is very much in favor of it, to have through streets and so forth and Little Gables to go across so that we don't have to have the borders intercepted. Originally, Coral Gables should have had Little Gables as part of it, but Mr. Stadler a long, long time ago had a fight with George Merrick, and that part stayed out of our community. And it will cost some money to the city to supply services, and that is a lower income base part of the community. But if we take in High Pines or Ponce Davis estate areas, those would raise income for the city. I really also would like to have Little Gables, by upzoning some of the areas over there, be a place where we might have affordable housing for our community. I would like to also, there's a big trailer park over there, and it was just recently, well, 2 or 3 years ago, bought by a new company. I would like to have that as a senior facility where we might have something similar to the Palace, but something that's more reasonable that people in our senior citizens in Coral Gables could move to. So I am very, very much in favor of annexation.
Thank you. This next question was also submitted by a Coral Gables resident. Over 1,000 residents signed a petition opposing the Paseo de la Riviera project because they believe the project violates zoning ordinances and encroaches on US 1. In 2015, the Coral Gables Commission unanimously approved the site plan and zoning changes for this project. To what extent do you believe developers have influenced the Commission's decisions on development projects? And if elected, what will you do to prevent future disregard of zoning and building codes? We'll start with Ms. Lesnick.
May I just, before we start on my time, this is a question from the audience?
From a resident. It was submitted in advance.
Well, it wasn't unanimously passed. It was a 4-1 vote to take down a overlay that had been on that community, on that part of US 1, all along from US 1 in the city of Coral Gables since 1979. And I think Dorothy Thompson, Mayor Dorothy Thompson, was back in those days when they put the overlay on there. The IRE building came on, which is now the University of Miami. And there was such an uproar that they went ahead and put that overlay on for 4 stories or less along US 1. And I was violently, not violently, let's say vehemently opposed to reducing that. But once you lowered that and took off, there was a legislative decision, once you took that overlay off from 4 stories for that location, basically anything along US 1 that had the right amount of land and so forth for parking and whatever other facilities they wanted, it could be used again to go more than 4 stories. And right now we have 2 massive buildings that are affecting the property values of the neighbors behind there. And I feel very, very sorry for the neighbors who live in that neighborhood that had to spend so much money and protest that coming on. But it was a 4-1 vote, and I was the only one on the commission that voted against it.
Mr. Valdez-Fowley?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. We have 400,000 cars pass through US 1 every day. Every day. Don't tell me that that's a quiet residential neighborhood. It isn't. We need development in our high traffic areas in order to reduce possibly our traffic, because people will live there and people will work there. We built that with strict compliance with our regulations at that time. And I have to point out to my opponent again that her vote on, it was a 5-0 vote, 5-0. Yes, Quesada, Celeste, Keon, Lago, and Quezon voted to permit that zoning that would then permit the building. She voted against the building, but she voted to permit the zoning. And I have it here. She voted to permit the zoning, and now she complains about it. Development, responsible development is very, very responsible. Limited development is very good for Coral Gables, because 5% downtown pays for 45% of your taxes. Without that downtown and without development, we would have to raise taxes by 100%.
Thank you. We'll allow 30 seconds for Ms. Lesnick to rebut.
I'm sorry, but that is totally inaccurate. The overlay on there removed the zoning from that site and allowed a high-rise to go in there. Not a low-rise, not a medium-rise, but a high-rise development to go into that location. After the ship was sunk, after everything was disapproved to continue to have the Holiday in there, you have to protect the neighborhood, and I voted for small things like having the setbacks back from the street, which is still very much to the street, and also for framing in the swimming pool upstairs so that it wouldn't be part of the, so it wouldn't disturb the neighborhood.
Thank you,
Ms.
Ms. Lesnick.
Totally inaccurate, and it was a 4-1 vote
Thank
that
you, Ms.
changed it.
Lesnick. This question was submitted by a Coral Gables resident. The Coral Gables Police Department currently owns a military-grade armored vehicle, which is mine-resistant and has a sniper perch on top. For what reasons does the City Beautiful need this vehicle, and is the annual upkeep cost a good use of public funds? We'll start with Mr. Valdez-Fowley.
I think we don't need that, that vehicle until we need it. And we never know when we're going to need it, because God knows, snipers, kidnappings, whatever it is, we don't know when we're going to need it. But if we need it, I'm glad to have it with us. It was given to us. I had nothing at all to do with accepting it, and I probably would have voted to accept it, because we don't know when we are going to need. In these times, in these days and age, we need all the protection for our citizens that we can possibly afford them.
Ms. Lesnick.
I agree with Mr. Valdez-Fowley. We need to be prepared, and safety is the #1 issue for having a wonderful community like Coral Gables. You cannot have too many precautions, and I believe in having a full contingency on the police force. When I came into office, we were 22 officers down, and now we're back to almost a full component of police officers. And we need to have our fire department to have new fire engines, new safety emergency vehicles, and a new fire department that's coming on over on Alcazar. So I'm very supportive, totally, of anything that we spend to protect the citizens of Coral Gables.
Thank you. This next question was submitted by a University of Miami student. In a recent survey of Florida municipalities, a majority of cities indicated that they are extremely or very concerned about several hazards linked to climate change, including stormwater or sewer system impacts, high winds, and major short-term flooding. What are a few specific steps, if any, that you believe the City of Coral Gables should take to prepare for such hazards? We'll start with Ms. Lesnick.
This is a very difficult question because it doesn't originate in Coral Gables. It originates all over in the world. We already have a sustainability committee in Coral Gables, and I've worked with Arella Bakay and trying to find and setting these things up with the University of Miami students here so that they can get together and work together from the City Sustainability Board, from the Water Management District, from a host of other professionals to come in here and work with the University of Miami students. And we just set that up yesterday because I was down here 2 nights ago to talk to the students here, and they're younger, and this is going to affect them. And one thing the students here are really, really concerned about is sea level rise, the environment, not using plastic, and maintaining our environment. So I think just more and more groups here, and our past mayor, Mayor Kaysen, was very involved in that too, and having experts like that come in and keep researching and doing as much as we can from our local community.
Mr. Valdez-Valley.
Thank you. And we have among, Mayor Kaysen is here with us, and he took the lead in this issue, and we also have Dr. Hal Wanless here from the University of Miami, who is the expert on this area, and we're lucky to have him at the University of Miami. And if you look at the LiDAR maps showing the rising level of the ocean, we are in serious, serious trouble. In 50 years from now, a lot of Coral Gables is going to be underwater if we don't do something about it. And I'm glad that Mayor Kaysen, and I'm also taking a lead role on this in trying to combat, to the extent that a small city like us can have, combat global warming, ocean rising. We have passed prohibition of plastic bags. We have passed styrofoam prohibition. We're now going to deal with plastic straws, and we're trying to be as environmentally conscientious as possible in Coral Gables. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we're going to move on to the next question. This question was submitted by a Coral Gables resident. It took me over a year to get permission from the Historic Preservation Board to do a small expansion to my historic home. What feedback have you heard from architects and their clients regarding the permitting process, and what changes to the permitting process would you support, if any? We'll start with Mr. Valdez-Valley.
I think that we've done a lot to make our permitting process friendlier. We have mobile permitting units, and we have a wonderful person in City Hall called Tony Cilio, who is the ombudsman, who does help everybody who needs help. And people call me to try to expedite permits, and I try to do that. However, sometimes people, because it's just a small modification, because it doesn't make any difference, people try to go against our historic preservation code, go against our code in terms of artificial grass in front of the house. We don't want that. We really don't want that unless it's absolutely necessary. And certain other things that are not permitted. I am very, very much for our historic preservation code, because that's what makes Coral Gables what Coral Gables is, and makes us proud to be an old city, 90-some years old, but well-preserved, that has the Mediterranean tradition that George Merrick imbued in us.
Ms. Slesnik.
I served on the Historic Preservation Board for 6 years here in Coral Gables. My daughters served and worked as a Historic Preservation Chief for Dade County for 9 years. I'm very pro-historic preservation, and that's what maintains Coral Gables and keeping our original 1920s and 30s structures, and now working into our 40s and 50s, because anything over 50 years is historic in Coral Gables. I don't know if you all know that, but if you try to do any work on your house and it's over 50 years old, you're into that department. However, I just want to say, back to the one issue about the sea level rise. I'm a realtor here in Coral Gables, and I work almost every week with Tony Cilio at City Hall and trying to close permits and so forth for homeowners. But sea level rise is causing concern on some of our most expensive property in the city of Coral Gables, and that's Gables Estates. And down by the water, and Edgewater, my time's running short, we need to really participate as much as we can as a city in saving our waterfront properties, because that brings a big tax base to our city.
Thank you. This next question was submitted by a Coral Gables resident. We have recently seen the introduction of alternative transportation types, including dockless scooters. What is your position on allowing these dockless scooters in our city? We'll start with Ms. Slesnik.
I think we need more regulation on these. I'm for not getting in a car, and I mean, I really like the trolley myself, but my office is on I'm on Lejeune Road, and I can go almost any place up and down on the trolley or the freebie. Those work very efficiently. The scooters, I find, are on the sidewalks all the time, and out where people walk by them, and so forth, and people are walking by with baby carriages, and and they're almost run over by some of these scooters. And I think they're a little dangerous. I don't see how you can even ask people to wear helmets on them when the people are out walking and just pick them up by charging the card for them. So I'm really, if people want scooters, I'm for scooters, but they need to be better regulated. And they are saving gas and cars moving in our downtown community.
Mr. Valdez-Valley.
Yes, I have debated we have debated the scooter question in City Hall for what I think was 70-some hours, or it sounded like 70-some hours for scooters. I'm exaggerating, of course. But they are an alternate mode of transportation. They are having cars in the street. We are talking about scooters and not the trolley and not the freebie. But I am for them, except that I don't want them in Giralda. I don't want them in Miracle Mile sidewalks, and I don't want them in they should be on streets or they should be on sidewalks in residential areas. I have many enemies that would like to see me on a scooter without a helmet. I'm not going to give them the pleasure of doing that. I am for scooters, but they should be regulated, and the idea of making people wear helmets, I think that that's a little counterproductive because they just would not take the scooter if they have to carry a helmet with them everywhere they go.
Thank you. This next question was also submitted by a Coral Gables resident. Florida state law preempts local governments from regulating firearms or ammunition and subjects local officials to personal liability and removal from office for attempting to do so. What is your position on municipal level gun regulations? We'll start with Mr. Valdez-Valley.
Yes, I tried to pass an ordinance forbidding the sale of arms, weapons, high repetition weapons, semi-automatic weapons in Coral Gables, and in spite of state law that forbid us from doing that, they said you're going to be submitted to removal, and I said for this cause, right after the Broward County massacre in the school, for this cause I would be very happy to be removed, and you're going to be subject to a $5,000 fine. I got 17 friends that say we'll give you, I don't know, $100 each or whatever it was, and we'll pay the fine for you. I don't want anybody to pay the fine. I think it was the right thing to do. The state forbid us from doing it, and we have joined 30-some cities that have passed or are trying to pass the same regulation, suing the governor, and we have prevailed in that we survived the motion to dismiss, and I'm looking forward to that litigation.
Ms. Slesnick.
I agree. I think we should go in with the League of Cities, which is a very well-known group around Florida, and work with them in this lawsuit. I don't like guns in general. I don't like having them around children. I don't like them but it is people are allowed to have guns. But I really think we need to work with the League of Cities and follow on the lawsuit.
Thank you. This next question was submitted by a Coral Gables resident. The Art in Public Places program is funded by taxing non-municipal projects with an aggregate project value of $1 million or more, excluding single-family homes and projects. What is your position on the Art in Public Places program? We'll start with Ms. Slesnick.
I'm very pro having art in public places and having the big developments especially to help fund the main bulk of the money coming in. What I'm opposed to is our art committee that it was set up for the city to come up with the designs and so forth for the different projects that are going in and not having public input. I'm a big proponent for public input no matter what. I've had town hall meetings where we had 400 people at the Biltmore Hotel for town hall meetings. We had another one for 370 people. So I think more citizens should be involved in what goes into their community. And we have this monstrosity that we call Audrey 2 down at Biltmore and Segovia, which is right around the corner from my house. And they said they had hearing after hearing and after hearing on it. But you don't look up and see what's going on in the historic preservation minutes or what's going on here. We don't communicate as well. I am totally opposed to putting art in public places without citizen input.
Mr. Valdez-Valley.
Yes, thank you. Art in public places, I think it's a wonderful, wonderful idea, and it's been around in the county since the 1970s. I served on that committee in the county for a while, and so did my brother, who led it for a long time. I am against art by committee. It's like having a horse designed by committee and God knows what you come out with. I think we should have experts, but I also think we should listen to people's opinion on what goes where. Talking about the flower, Mrs. Lessig is talking about, we have it there, but I think it's even that is facing the wrong way. It's facing opposite where the traffic is coming from. Anyway, the umbrella project in Giralda, I think was a fantastic project. We had 250 million hits all over the world with those umbrella projects. It cost us $87,000, but in covered parking alone, we made $130,000 more than we usually make. So parking covered the expense of those umbrellas twice over. I am very, very much for art in public places, and I'm very much for our program. Thank you.
Thank you.
Before you get to the next question, Mary Snow with the Coral Gables Community Foundation came up with the idea of the umbrellas, and she was here in the audience earlier. And I just want to thank Mary Snow for being so observant and seeing what's around the world.
Thank you. We have one more prepared question before we'll move into audience questions. This question was submitted by a University of Miami student. A team of developers recently proposed a project that would replace Coral Gables' 2 municipal parking garages near Miracle Mile with new structures that would include a total of 50% more parking spaces, as well as office and residential space. However, reports suggest that the city is considering pulling out of this proposed project. Moving forward, what do you think should be done with these 2 municipal parking garages? We'll start with Ms. Slesnik.
First of all, the city's not thinking about pulling out. The city owns the land of the 2 parking garages. And under our former city manager, I felt she wanted to build our own parking garages instead of having the 16-story towers there. Coral Gables does very well at building its own garages, and usually it takes 10 years for a city to recoup the funds that it takes to borrow to build up those garages. We have the museum parking garage and the one above Fritz and Franz. They're beautiful Mediterranean structures, and the city has done very well on both of those, and they started making money right away. The development, 2.5 years ago, when I was in office, the parking garages came up that a developer was approved for doing preparations and presenting a plan for the parking garages. What I find offensive is that it's taken 2 years and $1 million in his income to try to get these through City Hall, and a decision should have been made probably 1.5 years to 2 years ago.
Mr. Valdez-Valley?
Ms. Lessig is right that it was discussed 2 years ago or 4 years ago. It was also discussed in the 1980s when I was a commissioner. And in the 1990s, in 94, we decided that we wanted to replace those 2 obsolete parking garages, and we're still talking about them. There was misinformation here by commission candidates. This is not going to be a 15 or a 13-story building. This is going to be 750 needed parking spaces, and needed because we have taken away diagonal parking in Miracle Mile, we've taken away parking in Giralda, and we're trying to attract people walking, shopping, going to bars, restaurants, etc. in Miracle Mile, and we need the parking. They're going to be 750 parking spaces. I am against the city doing the parking spaces itself. We're building the public safety building. We're redoing fire station number 2. We have just gotten a disastrous Miracle Mile, Giralda, very lengthy reconstruction. The city is not good at building things. And we have, I think this is a good idea, and the implementation of it is the question then.
Thank you. We'll now move into audience questions. The city of Coral Gables has placed a ban on medical marijuana dispensaries, even though residents voted overwhelmingly to legalize it in Florida. Would you be in favor of changing that, and do you think it can help bring more foot traffic through our city and help economic development? We'll start with Mr. Valdez-Valley.
Maybe we can become the historic marijuana capital of Florida, in the tradition of George Merrick. I am against using marijuana as a way to attract people to any place. I'm very, very much against that. Yes, the state of Florida has legalized it, but the federal government has prohibited it, permanently prohibited marijuana, and we don't want to go against the federal government's prohibition When that changes, if it ever changes, but I think it will change, then we will look at the issue. Medical marijuana is one thing, and recreational marijuana, like has been approved by many other states, is a different thing. I'm, as I said, against using marijuana as a way to attract people or having marijuana bars, dispensaries, etc., coffee shops, as they call them in the Netherlands. I'm against that.
Thank you, Ms. Slesnick.
I agree.
Thank you. Our next question, also from the audience, is regarding contemporary homes. How is the new boxes construction? Contemporary homes. How is the new style of boxes construction compatible with the city's aesthetics? We'll start with Ms. Slesnick.
As you know, I'm a realtor, and I specialize in single-family home sales in Coral Gables. And I think some of the very contemporary structures that don't fit into the current existing neighborhoods is a detriment. Even when you put landscaping around them, I get lots and lots of calls from the neighbors, and people are allowed to build whatever they want, but there are certain sections of the city where the more contemporary structures should be going, and not in the residential neighborhoods where you have house after house that's built in the 1920s or the 1930s, and then you put a shoebox, a two-story shoebox there, and give variances to put a pool in the front yard because they don't have any space. So I really think we need to work with the Board of Architects and maybe come up with a solution where the neighbors have more input in what's going into their neighborhood because it affects their home value.
Mr. Valdez-Valle?
Yes, I'm very proud that we are the only city in Florida, I'm told, to have a Board of Architects that passes on people's tastes. I'm also opposed to having a Board of Architects passing on people's tastes, but I think it protects us against monstrosities. However, I was here, and I was the third vote, I'm sorry, that made the Biltmore Hotel prevail as a hotel, and not a condominium or a dormitory for the city, for the University of Miami. And the Biltmore was painted a color burnt orange. And the cry, the horrible reaction of people against that burnt orange was incredible. I think tastes change. And what may be too modern today may not be too modern in the future. I agree with Mrs. Slesnick in that we should not have a white box in the middle of a historic North Gables, Lisbon, Genoa, et cetera, street. That would be, but we can have tasteful modern structures.
Thank you. As a city focused on sustainability, do you feel our commercial properties should be required to comply with basic green practices? Mr. Valdez-Valle.
I am, yes, I feel that way, and I am very much for it. And we are passing legislation to require charging stations within reason in new developments, charging stations for electric vehicles. I think, however, that we also need to look at the present. They say Uber is the solution and fewer cars are going to be needed in the future. What if you have two babies and you have baby seats? Are you going to anchor the baby seats in Uber, bring them in, take them out, take it to the restaurant, the baby seat, call Uber again, and then anchor the... I think we are going to have a car for a long time. We still need parking. We're talking about building 750 spaces in Miracle Mile, but I am for the energy efficient buildings, and I think we should encourage them, and we should give them all the encouragement necessary.
Ms. Slesnick.
Yes, I believe every building that goes up now, especially in the city of Coral Gables, should be green. There's no reason why we can't follow this route. The city of Coral Gables, when I was in the city commission, again, Vince Lago was very instrumental in promoting the non-plastic use in our restaurants and so forth, which is really working out this way. I noticed going to other restaurants that we don't have, that have plastic bags now, and I sort of cringe when I get that as for my doggy bag. And I don't even have a dog. But I really think everything should be green if we can have some sort of, and I think they are requiring this for most of the new buildings coming into Coral Gables. It makes a difference in our future, and we do need to have all sorts of bells and whistles that go with that to have spaces for cars to charge, to have water fountains, to have different things to make it green.
Thank you. What is your opinion of the commercial intrusion into residential areas such as the North Ponce area? We'll start with Ms. Slesnick.
Are you talking about along Douglas Road?
I don't know. I'm just reading what was written. That's exactly what was written on the card.
Okay. I'm meeting with some residents on Saturday morning about the intrusion along Douglas Road and 8th Street and also on Flagler Street because Coral Gables goes up to that direction. Right now we have zoning that protects the residents, and when you say intrusion, we have code enforcement that sort of keeps commercial entities coming in and using it. Like along Coral Way, you used to have single-family homes, and small law firms or small businesses would come in there and take over those buildings, like it is from Red Road out to the expressway on Bird Road. I don't know. Certainly, I think our code enforcement protects those residents from having businesses come in there and using it. We do have a lot of cars, however, up on 8th Street and near the 901 and just north of that area, where there are so many cars using those areas and parking all over the neighborhood. I find that offensive because not enough parking is allowed in those buildings, and the city is letting them come in and have offices there with too many patients, too many businesses in those buildings.
Thank you. Mr. Valdez-Fowley.
Yes, I am very, very much against commercial intrusion in our north or anywhere else in our residential areas. Very, very much against that. And that was one of my criticisms for the Aloft Hotel, which was built on the west side of Lejeune. But anyway, I am very much against commercial intrusion, but you also need to provide services for those people. Is a dry cleaners that you can walk to commercial intrusion, or a pharmacy, or restaurants? Restaurants and ponds, I think they are good, and I think that people expect to have some kind of small commerce dedicated to the people that live in those areas. I am very much against offices. I'm very much against commercial intrusion in those areas. Very much against it.
Thank you. This question is also from the audience. Why has the Alhambra water tower been allowed to deteriorate the way it has, and how would you address this? We'll start with Mr. Valdez-Fowley.
Yes. In order to be legitimate, in order to be historically accurate, we have restored the Alhambra water tower with original paint. With original paint, which is not lacquer paint and which does not survive the way paint today would survive. If we painted it that orange color with vinyl paint or whatever it is, then it would last for 50 years or something. We have used the original materials in order to restore the Alhambra water tower, and I think that we should continue using the original materials in order to restore the Alhambra water tower, even if it takes more care. And yes, we have allowed it to go stale, I guess, or go old, but I am for using the original materials, which is the reason for that deterioration.
Ms. Slesnick.
This is really strange because somebody just wrote this to my opinion page in Jeanette's Journal, a newsletter I do every other month. And they asked specifically about this, and I looked into it, and the water tower is framed from, there's a concrete level up to about 8 feet, and then it's framed, and it's very difficult to maintain a frame building. So thank goodness the city has been good in preserving this as much as it has. A lot of money was raised about 12 years ago to put in and restore the water tower. But right now, there are like 8 lights out that are supposed to be in and around that, especially the water tower has lights at the top, and the city has not taken care of it and has not replaced those light bulbs. Also, I used it on the cover of my last magazine, and we had to Photoshop it because there was so much grime and mildew and so forth on the outside of the water tower. Why can't the city take care of its historic structures?
Thank you. I want to finish with a question on traffic, because this was one of the most common questions that I received from both residents and students. So I'll read you the same question I read to the Group 4 candidates. GPS apps, like Waze, often lead drivers to use residential streets as cut-throughs to avoid traffic on main roads, making residential streets more dangerous. What possible solutions do you have to fix this problem and make residential streets safer? We'll start with Ms. Slesnik.
Traffic is never going to be solved. It's an issue, and as we get more and more construction going on in Coral Gables, we're going to have more and more traffic. That's a fact of life. We have 1,000 people a day moving into the state of Florida. 300 of them come down to our county. We have more and more, when we do the 2020 census, I think we're going to have at least 64,000 people in Coral Gables. And for the last 40 or 50 years, we've had in the 45 to 48,000 range. So we've got a lot of new people in Coral Gables. When I did a survey from my office on the back page of the Miami Herald about 2 months ago, the #1 issue in Coral Gables was development. The #2 issue was traffic, and they are related to one another. It's like in real estate, location, location, location. The issue in this campaign is development, 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 and that affects the traffic. So we need to curb some of our development and curb some of our traffic, but also work with our wonderful police force, and they're starting to have more and more police officers on duty to curb speeding and everything else in our neighborhoods.
Mr. Valdez-Fowley.
Yes, I disagree very much that development is the cause of our traffic. The cause of our traffic is that it is impossible to get from east to west or west to east in Miami-Dade County, south of Flagler, without crossing Coral Gables. Flagler, 8th Street, Coral Way, Bird Road, Sunset, Old Cutler, etc., Kendall, etc. You have to cross Coral Gables in order to get east-west of Miami-Dade County. And the problem is that people who work downtown have to cross Coral Gables. If we had logical, reasonable, measured office development in Coral Gables, maybe people wouldn't have to cross it. Maybe people would work in Coral Gables and live in Coral Gables in the developments that are measured, reasonable, controlled, and they would live and work here. We are doing two things. One, we lowered the speed limit under my vote and under my administration. And two, we are working with the county, which is giving us a horrible time to implement traffic calming devices. And we have started, or are starting this week, to put those traffic calming devices south of Bird Road and east of Red Road, and then we will do it for Milan, Obispo, Sorolla, North Greenway, and other streets in Coral Gables that have a lot of east-west traffic.
Thank you. We will now move to our closing statements, and we will do this in reverse order from the opening statements. Each candidate will have 90 seconds to make their closing statement. We will begin with Mr. Valdez-Fowley.
Yes, I am very, very proud of my 2 years in the commission, and I'll tell you some of the things I've done. I established an innovation council, and our innovation council has made Coral Gables the leader in Latin America and in the United States in STEM education, in propagating STEM education with the University of Miami, with the Boeing Company, with the Organization of American States. We have a very vital council and a very vital innovation program, and that is my initiative. Art, I think I brought art to Coral Gables. And with the Coral Gables Community Foundation, but look at those umbrellas. And look at the art that we have today, new art, in Giralda and in Miracle Mile. It took prior commission years to finish Miracle Mile. 4 months after I was in, we finished it. I want to make Coral Gables a livable community with lower taxes. We haven't raised taxes, and we have a lot of new programs. Our downtown pays for 45% of our income with 5% of our geographic area, and that's where the development is taking place. Reasonable, measured, controlled development. Apart from our legacy pension issue, our legacy pension, $237 million, that we have full service cities, we have the lowest taxes but one, and one of my proudest accomplishments was the city manager, the former city manager issue, which we disposed of very, very elegantly. And now we have a police department and a police chief that everybody is very much proud of and everybody respects, and we don't have that issue anymore. I am proud of my 2 years, and I would ask for your vote on April 9th.
Thank you. Mrs. Slesnik.
Before I start my closing remarks, I would like to say I was on the commission, and Mr. Valdez-Foley was not, when the city voted to lower the speed limits from 30 to 25.
That is incorrect, ma'am.
First, let me thank the City of Coral Gables and the Chamber and the University of Miami and the other sponsoring organizations for letting us come here today and speak to you. To be clear, our mayor's office needs a new attitude and a tone, one that listens to the citizens, respects individuals, and remembers that this is a government of the people, for the people, and by the people. When a resident or business owner seeks out the mayor, the first thing they should hear from me is, how can I serve you? We have an important choice in this election, whether we want a concrete canyon or the city beautiful. It's up to you. And I vote for the city beautiful as versus a concrete canyon. My family has lived here for over 40 years. I'm very proud of my husband, who served here for 10 years as mayor. We love our community, and we want our grandchildren to inherit the same outstanding quality of life that we have enjoyed. I'm Jeanette Slesnik, and I would ask for your vote. I want to serve you, and I will listen.
Thank you to both candidates. I have just a few closing remarks. I want to thank all of you for joining us this evening. Coral Gables TV has filmed the program tonight and will be replaying it over the next several weeks. If you would like to view this program, you can consult www.coralgables.com for information on the rebroadcast. We'd like to thank our sponsors and partners in hosting this event: the Coral Gables Democratic Club, the Gables Good Government Committee, the Miami Young Republicans, the League of Women Voters of Miami-Dade, the Cuban American Bar Association, the University of Miami, and the Coral Gables Chamber of Commerce. And of course, we want to thank our candidates for participating. Please join me in thanking our candidates. Finally, our Vice Mayor, Lago, could not attend this evening due to a travel commitment, but he asked us to remind all of you to remember to vote on Tuesday, April 9th. The deadline to register is March 11th. Thank you.